Sometimes the best advice in the world doesn't come from some fancy book. It comes from the real, unfiltered, and sometimes painful experiences of total strangers. Today, we're diving into thousands of those life lessons, all shared online, and we're going to see what we can learn from them together.
So it all kicked off with this one simple but, wow, incredibly powerful question on Reddit. It asked, what life mistake taught you the hardest lesson? And this wasn't just some casual post. It was a real invitation for people to open up. And thousands, literally thousands did, sharing the mistakes that completely changed who they are.
The response was just this tidal wave of heartbreak, regret, and wisdom that was earned the hard way. So, to make sense of it all, we've organized this flood of advice into a journey. We're going to start from the inside and work our way out, beginning with the most critical relationship any of us will ever have, the one we have with ourselves.
Right. So before you can build anything real on the outside, you got to get your own house in order first. This first theme is all about those foundational lessons, the ones about character, about health, and about your own mindset.
Okay, this was a huge one. It came up again and again. So many people shared this deep regret of twisting themselves into pretzels just to get other people to like them. The lesson, which this user Vil85 just perfectly sums up, is so simple but so deep. Being your authentic self isn't just about honesty, it's literally the secret to your own happiness. Now this is really interesting because the thread completely reframes an idea we hear all the time. One user, OK_Explanation5824, broke down this crucial difference. It's not about just being nice. A so-called nice guy is all about getting approval, right? They'll avoid conflict at all costs. But a good man, as defined here, lives by a code, by core principles even when it's hard. It's about choosing integrity over just being agreeable.
So, when you boil all that advice about mastering yourself down, you get these core ideas you see here. The big message that just kept coming up was the need to build a really strong internal foundation. That means first and foremost, being brutally honest with yourself. It means knowing that discipline and just showing up every day will beat raw talent in the long run. And man, this one is crucial, investing in your health now and taking total ownership of your life instead of blaming everyone else for where you're at.
Okay, so once that inner world starts to get in order, the lessons begin to move outward, into the real world. This next section is all about the tough wisdom people learned from the battlefield of career, money, and ambition.
Whoa. Okay, this is a pretty stark take, and a lot of people debated it, but it perfectly captures a pressure that so many felt. Whether they agreed with it or not, this link between how much money you make and what you're worth as a person, well, that was a really painful lesson for a lot of guys.
But amidst all the regrets, there was also some incredibly practical advice. A user named AirieHole1898 laid out this super clear 4-step career plan. You can see it right here. First, just get your foot in the door, even if the pay sucks. Then, work your tail off to learn everything you can. Step 3 is about building your professional presence online. And finally, and this is a big one, start investing your money from day one.
And man, this slide shows one of the toughest financial lessons shared. It's all about navigating money and family. A user, James Moltris, told this story about how sharing his exact salary, which he did out of love, right, it ended up leading to guilt trips and him losing control over his own money. It's this painful tightrope you have to walk between taking care of your family and protecting yourself. The money regrets in this thread were so urgent, and pretty much everyone said the same thing. The core message was this: time is your single biggest advantage. As you can see from these points, the huge regrets were about not investing or just not starting soon enough. It's about really getting that massive decisions, like buying a house, one of the only 1 or 2 you might ever own, can have these lifelong ripple effects if you don't choose very, very wisely.
All right, now we get to the most complicated, the most emotional part of this whole thing, our relationships with other people. This is where the absolute hardest lessons are so often learned.
I want to just pause here for a moment, because this story from the user, rendered person, was one of the most painful things I read in the entire thread. He shared his deepest, most profound vulnerability with the one person he thought he could trust, only to have it turned into a weapon against him, which is the most devastating consequences.
And the most tragic thing is his story wasn't unique. As this slide says, comment after comment echoed this awful theme, the mistake of giving your trust, your vulnerability, to the wrong person. It just hammers home how incredibly important it is to choose who you let into your inner circle. So this led to this huge split in the advice.
On one hand, you've got people like Real Truth Navigator, who came to the conclusion that at the end of the day, you can only ever rely on yourself. But on the complete other side of the spectrum, you have users like Ahambram Asmi, arguing that family and deep relationships, they're the only things that truly matter.
And when it came to love, oh boy, the advice was just as polarized. For some, like this user, Dictator Daddy01, their single biggest mistake in life was the entire act of falling in love. But then you scroll down just a little bit in the same thread and you find the exact opposite advice. For user spoiled_legend, the lesson wasn't to avoid love, it was to fight for it. That it's the most important battle you'll ever fight.
And then you get this, just this blunt, pragmatic takeaway from jealous_decision307, who basically says, forget all that, career's way, way more important than any relationship. So, what are you even supposed to do with all that?
And that brings us to our last section, and maybe the most important lesson of all. It's about figuring out how to navigate a world that's just full of conflicting advice.
I mean, think about it. You just heard people argue that love is the answer, and also that it's a life-destroying mistake, that you can only trust your family, and that you are completely alone. So with all this contradictory wisdom flying around, what's the actual takeaway? And you know what? I think this quote from Ducati 781 just nails it. Maybe the ultimate lesson from hearing about thousands of other people's mistakes isn't to find some perfect map to follow. Maybe it's about getting the courage to draw your own map, knowing that the mistakes you make along the way, they're not failures. They're actually essential parts of the journey.
This is the big meta lesson, right? This is the one truth underneath all the noise. We can learn from other people's stories, for sure, but our path is ultimately our own. The lessons that really, truly stick are the ones we learn for ourselves.
So I'll just leave you with this question on the screen. After hearing all these hard-won lessons, after basically getting a cheat sheet from the regrets of thousands of people, what's one painful mistake that maybe, just maybe, you won't have to make on your own journey now? What piece of this wisdom are you going to take with you?